Today we're gonna talk about storytelling because the gap between being followed and being trusted, it's story. And in this video, I'm gonna walk you through the 5 steps that turn the basic content into something that actually people remember. And I can guarantee after watching this, you're gonna rethink the way you create. By the way, I'm Ryan Tricky and I've been creating content for the past 4 years and working with content creators for the past 2 years. Okay, let's dive in. Let me give you what I believe is the clearest storytelling tool any content creator can use, and it's called Spine. It's a 5-part framework: setup, problem, insight, new way, and end message. We're gonna go deep on each one and I'm gonna show you how to use it in your content. But first, let me show you why storytelling works the way it does. Because once you get this, everything changes. When people share honest stories on social media, they're not just entertaining, they're reminding us we're not the only ones going through it. And that creates a moment where you feel seen. And that's where trust begins. But here's where it gets really interesting. Our brains are literally hardwired for narratives. In fact, long before we had smartphones or even books, stories were how we passed down survival tips, warned about danger, and taught important values to the next generation. Because your brain lights up differently when you're hearing a story versus just hearing any information. That's why you might probably forget a statistic, but remember a story you heard 3 years ago. And most important than that, there is even neuroscience behind it. Research shows that when you hear a story, your brain releases oxytocin, the same chemical responsible for trust. So when you tell a story, people don't just listen. They feel, they relate, and they trust. And that's probably what you want. Because content growth isn't about numbers. It's about making people feel like you're talking to them, not at them. So now that you understand why it works, let's break down exactly how to do it using Spine. Step number 1, the setup. Don't get me wrong, setup is not about your background. It's about anchoring attention. Because in the first few seconds of any story, whether it's a reel, a podcast, or a YouTube video, the setup is where you pull people into a specific moment in time. It's where you open the door and say, just come inside. And if your story is just, I learned something cool, that's not a story, that's just information. But if your story starts with, I was in my kitchen, it was 10 p.m, my last post tanked, and I felt like quitting. Now, you've created presence. And the setup doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be specific. Because people connect to details, to time, to places. And the human brain doesn't latch onto I was sad. It latches onto I was lying on the floor surrounded by notes, thinking, what's the point? Setup creates texture. And without it, nothing lands. Step number 2, the problem. And now we introduce tension. And this is where most creators fall short because they hide the problem. They skip over it or downplay it because it feels vulnerable to admit that something wasn't working. But here's the truth. Tension is what makes stories matter, and that's when your audience sees themselves in your story. For example, when you say I was changing my bio for 2 hours and it still feels cringe, people go, same? So don't be afraid to let them feel the weight. In fact, the more specific and honest the problem is, the stronger the emotional connection will be. Because let's be real, no one connects to perfect. They connect to the moment you almost gave up, or question yourself, or thought maybe this isn't for me. And the problem doesn't have to be dramatic, it just has to be honest. Step number 3, the insight. And this is the shift. This is where something clicks. It's the bit in the story where you realize you've been looking at things upside down. Here is what matters most. This is not about having the answer. It's about having a perspective shift. It could be something you read, a sentence that stuck, a question someone asked you, or just a moment of stillness when you saw the whole picture differently. And when you deliver an insight that hits, your story becomes transformational. Not just for you, but for them. And this is the value. This is the reason they remember your story tomorrow. And if you skip this part, you've just told them a story about a problem with no purpose. Step number 4, the new way. And this is the action. It's about showing what you did with the insight, how you moved differently, what changed in your behavior, your mindset, or strategy. And this is critical because people don't just want to feel, they want to move. They want a path. A small decision, a mental shift, a try this instead. It's where you show people that change is possible, even if it's small, and especially if it's small, because your story will become a mirror. Not just look what I did, but here is what you can do. It closes the loop, it builds credibility, and it turns content into growth. Step number 5, the end message. And now it's the moment to land the plane. It's where you zoom out and ask, what did this story mean? What's the takeaway your audience will walk away with? What do you want them to remember 10 minutes after they close the app? And the end message should be simple, emotional, and especially true. Think of it like the quote they'll screenshot, the line they repeat to a friend, the part that will make them share. And by the way, you probably know that shares is the most important metrics for growth, so focus on that. Give them the right end message, and I can guarantee that your story will not just be watched, it will be shared. Now, let's summarize. Step 1. The setup. This is where you will start by grounding your story in a real moment. Make it visual and make it specific. Step 2. The problem. You're gonna introduce the tension. What's the emotional friction? What's the honest challenge? Step 3. The insight. What clicked? What shift in thinking happened that changed everything? Step 4. The new way. What did you do differently because of that shift? And finally, the step 5, the end message. What's the one truth you want your audience to remember, feel, and maybe even repeat to someone else? All of this, it's the framework that lets your truth actually land. You don't need to go viral. You don't need the perfect story. You just need the structure that helps people feel what you felt and learn what you learned. That's what storytelling is. That's what builds real connections, real relationships. So in your next piece of content, don't just share advice. Share your moment and use your spine. And if you're still here, I think we're on the same wavelength. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. And by the way, if this helped, I want to hear from you. What's one story you never shared, but deep down you know that someone out there needs to hear it? Just drop it in the comments so I can look at them. Let me know your thought about the video and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, don't just create content, create connections. Ciao.